Would you like a secret trick that can make you remember anything?
Could you please?
Whether it's details from a textbook or an entire speech, and you could do it all without breaking a sweat. Sounds like magic, right? Well, it's not. It's called the Memory Palace technique, and it is an ancient mental tool that has been used by ancient philosophers, language learners, memory champions, and all kinds of people who like to be able to give presentations from memory or remember details at meetings, etc. And it's allowed me to memorize crazy amounts of info with a lot of fun. It's not just that it's easy, but it's like a mental video game that takes place entirely between you and the information you want to remember. And, in case we haven't met before, this is Dr. Anthony Metivier from magneticmemorymethod.com. And back when I was in grad school, I was drowning in textbooks, terrified that I wouldn't be able to pass my field exams and then later my dissertation. And it was in the darkness that I discovered this technique of the Memory Palace. And it was almost overnight like unlocking a superpower in my brain. So the problem is that I wasn't sure how I was going to find enough memory palaces to keep going because I had a lot of textbooks and a lot of stuff to learn related to languages and whatnot. And so what I want to do today is help you understand what I figured out that helped me develop all the memory palaces that I could ever dream of filling and use them to do things like memorizing Mandarin in a skateboard park, which helped me pass a Mandarin exam, which is a very challenging thing to do, especially when you're getting to be my age and your energy starts to get lower and lower, and the test was at 6 p.m. So the Memory Palace is such a powerful technique. Stick around, and I'll show you how you can turn your mind into a mental kingdom filled with entire cities of memory palaces that is going to revolutionize your learning life. And let's address the elephant in the room. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to be an artist. You don't have to even see pictures in your mind. And I was skeptical of this technique too when I first encountered it, and I was just wrong. And part of the thing that a lot of people have blocks has to do with that they get caught in questions, some of which aren't answerable, right? So, like what is a memory palace? That I can answer. It's based on your house, for example. You know every room, you know every corner, at least relatively well. You might even remember that creaky floorboard in the hallway. I had one floorboard just this morning creak, and I looked at my wife and was like, what's that? And, it's getting to be winter here in Australia, and that familiarity is what we use to help ourselves store information. We place facts like vocabulary words or historical dates along a mental journey through a place that we know well. And you don't even have to know it that well. It can surprise people that you could just break things down to corners and walls. And you can even leave out parts of locations so that you just focus on what you do remember. That's the principle of the Memory Palace. It's in your memory already. So you don't have to go to new locations to memorize them. That would be a memorized palace. No, your brain loves spatial connections. So for whatever reason, the brain just sticks those locations like glue, or at least partially, right? So that's a what question. That's what it is. And that's very easy to answer. But why the brain does that? Many people get hung up on that. And we just have to let that go. Neuroscientists don't even really understand where or why or how the brain produces the experience of consciousness, right? So how are we going to get at memory? It's a mystery, and so we have to let go a lot of questions, and we just have to assume the identity of someone who takes action. So let's take action right now to help us understand more about what the technique is before I help you determine exactly what you're going to do to develop many, many memory palaces. Start by just picturing your bedroom, and in your bedroom, wherever it feels right to you, either on the wall or a corner, imagine a giant sticky note with a picture of your mom waiting for your phone call. Just give yourself a second to think about that image. And it doesn't have to be very visual. You could just think about it logically. On the wall, a sticky note with your mom waiting for a phone call to remind you that you should call your mom, right? Now move to your kitchen. And whether you have a calendar in your kitchen or not, we have one stuck to our fridge. Actually, we have last year's calendar stuck to our fridge as well. Just imagine something like that. And a dentist is dancing on the calendar. And that can help you remember that you need to make a dentist appointment, for example. And move throughout your house just like this. And you're going to be able to think back to those locations, think back to the weird images that you have there, and you'll be able to remember what it was that you wanted to remember. And you might think, okay, those are very simple things. Call your mom, make a dentist appointment. But it's the same process that I used to memorize all kinds of information. And I've given many, many demonstrations and given a TEDx talk from memory, etc. So you can either take my word for it or do your due diligence and do some research to see if I really know my stuff. But at the end of the day, I don't even need to know my stuff. This has been used for thousands of years. There are hundreds of memory champions who have demonstrated this technique to thousands of random digits. And some of those memory competitors are accomplished language learners. So let's talk now about what it is that they're going to do. I'm going to give you some examples from memory competitors that I've talked to, the kinds of memory palaces that they select. I'll give you examples from successful magnetic memory method students and my own examples as well. But first, there's a framework that I think you'll find very useful. The memory palace technique is based on the method of Loci. Sometimes people pronounce it Loki, and both actually work, according to my colleague in learning, Luke Rainieri, who specializes in Latin. He says Loci, Loki, they both can work. So let's just take it and turn it into a tool, no matter how you want to pronounce it. L.O.C.I. The Loci Framework is going to be a way that you can look at any possible location and decide whether it's going to be a good one or not. This is just a simple acronym to help you test. So we know that loci itself refers to location. The L in loci means logic. Can you use the location in a way that has some form of logical order? Distinct rooms, not a chaotic open field, certainly not when you're a beginner. You can use fields later, and it took me actually a couple of years before I started to use outdoor locations, and to this day I still use outdoor locations that have some kind of logical order. It just makes sense, right? Because you want to build it out of what's in your memory, and you don't want to have to memorize the location. So logic is what we have for L. O is for ownership. And this means personalization, or does it feel personal to you? Ideally, you pick places that you know well, or at least have some connection to yourself. So it's perfectly possible to use a random hotel that you stayed in once, and I do that from time to time. But I then add a personal element. So I try to use hotels where I remember at least why I was in that city, or where I was traveling to, in order to have some sense of ownership. That's a memory tool. So it's really, really important. Then C is for clarity. And clarity means, is there anything here that's going to confuse me or going to cause emotional upset? Can I just use it with clarity without having bad memories come up, right? So a classroom can work like a charm. Classrooms often are very logically structured. So the chalkboard is in a very tight, uniform, tidy way. The chairs and desks are often put in a nice formation, right? But that doesn't mean that it gives you clarity, because you might remember, oh man, that teacher, he really wasn't nice to me, and you have some kind of trauma around it. So classrooms can be good, but not always, right? Now, there's one last part of the acronym, this tool for testing memory palace locations, which is I. But before I give you the I, if you enjoy and appreciate free memory training like this, and you're new to this channel, get subscribed and smash, and I do mean to magnetically smash, that thumbs up button to help me reach as many people with this training as possible. So ideally, everyone in the world has a chance to at least encounter the miracle of what human memory can be. Yes, even in, and especially in, the era of AI machines. We need to get together and help iron strengthen iron, because we're stronger together as people who care about our experience of memory. Okay, I is for indexable. And this is a super important concept if you want to use memory palaces at speed and have a lot of them. So can you name the place? Can you give it a number? For example, my mom's place. Well, she has a name. I could use her first name. I could use her last name. Or I can just use M for mum. And this is going to help me keep track of the memory palace when I'm juggling many, many memory palaces. But it's also going to help me give it a reason for why that I'm using it, right? And it can be that the place that mum lives doesn't have her first name or her last name or M for mum at all. Could be that it's on Brown Road, which happened to me. I memorized a bunch of stuff from Giordano Bruno on Brown Road because of the relationship between B and B, right? And so many magnetic memory method masterclass students have found this indexability very, very useful. And it is a game changer for me, especially when I do a lot of language learning. If I have to memorize a new word, ascesis, I think, is the one that I'm picking up here, and metanoia are words that I'm picking up from this book by Robert here, A.E. Robert, and it's very, very powerful. So just look at Robert and use the Ross building at York University, and boom, I can start to lay out in the 7th floor grad lounge of the Ross building these words. And I'm just memorizing these words now, but I will go back and check my accuracy later. But that speed of the location, the ownership, the clarity, and the indexability is, I just picked this book up yesterday, started reading it, boom, Ross building, because Robert is R, right? That's how that works. It's very, very powerful. So it's now your cheat code, Loci, for picking winning locations. And just try it right now. Think of one thing you would love to memorize, and then try and find a location that matches that. Maybe you have a chemistry exam. So can you find a building that has a letter C associated with it? You can even do one better. If it's chemistry, well, chemistry is CH. So what else starts with CH? A church, right? You don't have to be a believer, but there are probably churches on your radar that you could use for something related to chemistry to get the ball rolling, right? If you have to memorize charts and diagrams for your work, well, chart also starts with CH, right? And it could be a church. Could be your favorite coffee shop, and then you use the name. We like one that starts with W, and I've used it for W words. So think this through, hold what you come up with in memory, and immediately write it down, ideally in a journal. And I highly recommend that you develop your memory palaces in writing in journals and your ideas for those locations, because we're going to explore a bunch of ideas where you can take this simple principle and apply it to all kinds of locations. So we've already covered the classic buildings, right? The memory palace is so golden when you use buildings because they're so structured and they can be so easily familiar. So I would recommend that you start maybe not with your home, but some building that you're familiar with. It could be a garage where you played in a band. I use a garage where I played music with one of my first bands, and it was next to a train track, and the train used to be louder than we were, so we would stop playing and we would yell, "Train!" And we even wrote a little train theme song, and we couldn't compete with the noise of the train. But that's a very, very powerful memory palace, garage for G, right? That can be something that you use. It's very small, but nonetheless, it's useful. You can think about schools, as long as you don't have bad emotions around them. Universities, I use York University campus a lot, and other places that I've taught, University of Saarland, I taught at Rutgers, I use that in New Brunswick, and there's a train station there that I've used in New Brunswick, and so on. And it's just amazing, right? And New Brunswick, N or B, which is it going to be? Well, I can actually use both. There's all kinds of public places. Start to write down the locations that are buildings in public places. I'll feed you some ideas, but even just pause and see what you can come up with yourself. This is a great memory exercise and a spatial memory exercise that has semantic memory components because you're thinking of words that link to space, which is part of the ancient memory technique of the memory palace. Okay, so you could think libraries, museums, bookstores, and all kinds of things like this, right? One of my favorite memory palaces is a bookstore that I visited in Cairo, in a particular part of Cairo called Samalek. And I use that very limited while I was there to pick up a couple of phrases, shukran, jazilan, I think it was, thank you very much, right? This kind of thing. And this is just so many locations. Office cubicles. It could be that small. It could be the treadmill in the corner area of a gym that you really like. It could be a filing cabinet that you use as a filing cabinet in your mind, right? And that would be not a building as such, but if you think about it, a filing cabinet looks like an apartment building. So you could actually imagine a filing cabinet being the portal to an actual apartment building. In a way, you open it up and then you actually leap inside and woo, away you go, you're in some building. Are those things actually useful to do? Well, they can be fun, right? And it may be useful for you. The point is that you now have buildings or elements inside of buildings that will help you make memory palaces. But we can go further. Outdoor memory palaces, for example. So you might be more of an outdoor person than I am, and if so, no problem. Again, the principle would be try to use the L.O.C.I acronym to work out what's going to be the best. So you look for clear landmarks, for example. And there are many in parks. Streets tend to have landmarks. And at more advanced levels that you can learn in the Magnetic Memory Method Masterclass and my live workshops, you can learn to use the numbers of buildings to help you place mnemonic statues in front of those buildings. And I've used a Brisbane skateboard park to prep for the Mandarin exam that I took. I used many places in Brisbane to help with that. But each ramp can be an area to place a phrase, super vivid, especially if you enjoy skateboarding. You can use rivers or trails. I used the Brisbane City Cat ferry stops along the river. And the principle there is not chaos. That river could just be very mentally overwhelming if you tried to track the whole thing. But I'm just using the stops as independent memory stations, and each stop can have a number of stations within it. You can use parking lots. You can use the outdoor areas of zoos. These kinds of places work great. I mean, imagine a giraffe holding math formulas in its mouth at the zoo. Or you could use a zoo to memorize the names of animals in foreign languages, for example, while you're actually visiting them at the zoo. Ultimately, the key is try to find defined paths. A random forest could work, but for most of us, it's going to be too vague. But a hiking trail with clear markers, that can be perfect. Or even just part of a hiking trail where you know that halfway through there's a sign. So you use the beginning, you use the middle where there's a sign, maybe close to the end where there's a lookout, or maybe the lookout is at the end. Now, for an exercise, just identify an outdoor spot that you love. Maybe drop it in the comments to share. I'm curious where you love outdoor locations. And maybe we can find memory palace excursions that we build for ourselves thanks to locations that people share in the comments. That would be pretty cool. Now, what about shrinking things down? Did you know that you can use your body as a memory palace? This is perfect if you're stuck indoors or you want something, so to speak, portable. And what you can do is divide your body in many, many different ways. The carpal bones in my wrist, for example, I remember most of them, I think, accurately. The pisiform, the lunate, the navicular, which can also be called the scaphoid, the capitate. Anyway, I won't go through all of them, but the reality is that the wrist itself became a kind of memory palace. But think about this. If I wanted to memorize something else that belonged to the body, I don't have to use my body. I could use Brad Pitt's body. I could use various bodies of singers like Ariana Grande. Is that how you say her name? Never memorized it, but I think that comes to mind as a person for the letter A. We could use Cookie Monster. We could use Dracula. And if you think about it, A to Z, you would wind up with 260 locations if you divided the body the way that I do. But that's a little deeper down the rabbit hole than I intended to go today. So forgive me if I go on to some real world success stories, because you might be still skeptical, and I would just love for you to know about some of the people in the magnetic memory method world who have just crushed it with memory palaces. So I think a lot of Kevin Richardson. He originally got the magnetic memory method masterclass and left it for 2 years. He struggled with Japanese throughout that time, but then he came back to it, and he went from zero to hero by mapping words to various locations, and he sent his memory palace. He even spent a good deal of his time on the Magnetic Memory Method podcast, which you can listen to this day, explaining his transformation and how it worked. But the key was essentially using this Loci formula to have a logical journey through locations in places where there was some sort of ownership and clarity and indexability. Then there's Lee Escobar. He's a speaker, and when he came to me, he wanted to memorize not only the name of every member of his audiences, but also the seat number for a killer presentation. And so together we gave ourselves some time in one-on-one consulting, and he wound up blowing everyone away. And it had to do more with this alphabetical body memory palace, but applied to the bodies within the conventions where he was speaking.
And so I just want to tell everybody, if you're looking to take your memory palaces and your memory techniques to the next level, Anthony's the guy. If he can help me go from not even remembering people's names, and that's the biggest issue of my life in my seminars, to actually being able to memorize over 100 and something people's names, close to 200, man, he can help any of you guys out with anything.
Then, this is not a student, but a colleague of mine, Alex Mullen, 3-time world memory champion, who uses his home as a memory palace to have some pretty insane results. What he can do with the deck of cards is incredible. And his secret, well, you already know. It's using simple, familiar locations, and you can watch on his YouTube channel him in his kitchen taking you through how that he does it. There's many, many other examples I could give. None of these people are superhuman. They're regular people who got their identity aligned with practice. They didn't overthink it. They did it. And if you want to be able to do it, start by identifying locations that fit the Loci principle, the tool: location, organization, clarity, and indexability. And now let's get a little bit personal with my top 3 memory palaces that really changed the game for me. Now, I've mentioned the Mandarin thing with skateboard parks and so on. But really, the most fun part of it was actually using the Chinese classroom itself to memorize vocabulary. And I sketched it out on the very first day of class to lock the layout in my mind. Not a drawing, not art, just a simple sketch. And it was like my brain was fully immersed in that particular area. And I just constantly memorized the material as we were in class and reviewed it later. Now, I used many, many other memory palaces, but my favorite was the classroom itself. And there was even a poem that I memorized as part of the testing process of the course. And it was just a beautiful poem. It had to do with opposites, near and far, and so on. And that was pretty cool because I was so near to the memory palace that I was using, which is sometimes a principle. I didn't use it intentionally at that time, but it is sometimes a principle that you could use very intentionally if you have enough memory palaces that are near to you. And you may find ways to use ones that are far away from you to have a thematic connection to your memory palaces. Now, I also mentioned the bookstore in Zamalek, part of Cairo. I fell off a camel when I was there, and I didn't really have a chance to focus on memorizing as much Egyptian Arabic as I wanted because I was in a lot of pain. But I still gathered memory palaces, and I still put myself through as many of the paces as I could. Then the one that I used for my TEDx talk is very, very special to me indeed, because I used the apartment we lived in Brisbane, but also the neighborhood. And it was really the first time that I used an outdoor memory palace extensively. It was like a hybrid indoor-outdoor memory palace. But also, people ask a lot about reusing locations. And it's risky business, quite frankly. And it was a risky move to use a memory palace that I'd used before for the TEDx talk. I wouldn't do it again, quite frankly. But I'm an experimental person. I teach others to be experimental, so in for a penny, in for a pound. And that experience of reusing that memory palace for the TEDx talk, it was the 3rd time I'd used it. It taught me so much about how flexible the memory palace technique can be. So keep that in mind, that you just need to experiment. Take risks once in a while. What's the worst that's going to happen? Well, if you're speaking in front of an audience that big, millions of views on that TEDx talk, it can be that never would have reached that many people if I blew it. But nonetheless, fortune favors the brave, as they say. Okay, enough about me and my memory palaces, although I hope you see the joy, see the lived experience, the immersion, and the alignment of my identity with the person who does, rather than thinking about it, actually doing it so that I can think about it better on the other side. Let's talk about your game plan. What are you going to choose? Is it going to be your home, your school, your hand? Use the Loki Framework to make sure it's a good fit. Start small with 8 to 10 stations, or if it's your hand, 5. I mean, you have the number to choose right here, and you could even take one away and use 4 or 3 or 2 or 1, right? Just get comfy with what it is that's going to make you a doer, and then experiment. Try variety. This is one of the keys of unlocking your spatial memory. Not one place and not one kind of place, but many places. I wish that I would have been more brave to use outdoor spots sooner. I missed out on so much progress that I could have had sooner. Buildings, sports arenas, more bodies. The more you practice, the sharper your spatial memory gets. And then that means you're going to be able to apply the technique to memorize whatever it is that gets you further ahead in life. So speaking of taking things further, I've got an upcoming boot camp. It's one that's generally only offered to people who are on my mailing list because they've taken the free memory improvement course at magneticmemorymethod.com. That's where you go, to the main site to get registered. If you haven't already, maybe you need to go through it again. Do that so that you can come to some of my workshops. And I really, really look forward to helping you through the course on developing memory palaces. Now you have everything you need to identify what memory palaces are out there for you and test them to see if they're actually worth using. And all you have to do next is let me know if you found this helpful. Smash the like button. That helps. Leave a comment. Get subscribed if you're new here. Hit the bell so you never miss an upcoming memory hack or a reading strategy that I may have for you, or just interesting things that I'm reading and learning about people who have mastered multiple topics, the clues that I'm absorbing into my own life. And I really do want to hear from you. What is the memory palace you're going to build either for the first time or next? Let's make your brain unstoppable together. And if you want to keep going immediately right now with more information on memory palaces, you've listed a whole bunch. I suggest you stick around and watch my video on how to use the memory palace technique for studying next.